Hello everyone and welcome. This is Super Revolution. We switch over to the Nandu Institute. We see Ming He and he thinks about how much he's been through already and how he could return to his peaceful school life. We see him running around the track, going to school in the morning, doing combat training in the afternoon, and studying at night. We then switch to inside of a classroom. The professors tell the students that most calamity fragments produce radiation. Those fragments can also change the structure of some material. The professor gives an example about the fragment and how it could change a black rock into a rare crystal in a small amount of time. The toughness of that crystal could surpass steel. In the professor's hands is a condensed crystal. Minky sees his phone vibrating and checks it. He gets a notification about the transaction of the life drop and it's been completed. They sold it for $3 million and he got $2,850,000 since there was a 5% cut. He thinks to himself that he hit the jackpot and he became rich overnight. The professor asked if anyone in the class has a strength power who could demonstrate. Fang raises her hand and tells the professor that Minky has a power like that. So, the professor tells Minky to come up. He tells Minky to use all of his strength and try to crush the crystal. Minky questions if he should use all of his strength, which the professor tells him not to underestimate the crystal. So, Minky clenches his fist with all of his strength. The professor tells the class that 99% of them won't even be able to make a dent on the crystal. He tells the class that the material was contaminated by radiation of calamity fragments. It will undergo change in the structure and absorb the surrounding elements to condense. After that, it will change into a mutated crystal. The professor then turns around to Minky to thank him but sees that he destroyed it. He looks with shock and then questions on what happened. Ming He tells him that he told him to use all of his strength. The professor then asked if Ming He is a senior who snuck into his class. Fang then speaks up and tells the professor that Ming He is a student of their class. See, I kind of find it funny because all the other students looked with shock while Ming He just crushed it in his hand. But then the professor's like, whoa, like what's going on? Like no one's done this and we're in freshmen. Like what's happening here? And so it's just pretty funny to notice that and also to witness all the other people's reactions at Minky. Two girls in the back of the class say that Minky is pretty handsome and cool. Lee looks with irritation and says that it was probably a faulty crystal. The professor says that it's his fault and he should have brought a higher grade crystal. He then continues and tells the class that if they ever see a crystal like that, they should harvest it since it's a very strong material. He says that it will be a great help to them. Minky then notices that there are crystals on his arm. He questions on what's going on and then asks if his mystic fist reacted to it. The bell then rings and the professor tells everyone that the class is dismissed. Minky goes up to the professor and asks him about the crystal. He shows his arm to the professor and tells him about a reaction that happened once he came in contact with the crystal. The professor asked Minky about his power, which he tells him about it. The professor tells him that it's nature that he got a reaction. Minky thinks logically and says that such a small rock should have such a reaction. The professor tells Minky that he hasn't been paying attention since that rock went through mutation. The rock became a crystal which had a density of many times greater than it would normally be. He tells him not to underestimate it since its condensity is so much that it's like a small mine. Minky then questions on if his mystic fist is connected to density and not volume of a material. The professor tells Minky to come with him so they could do an experiment. They will go to his laboratory which has higher grade crystals there. Minky questions on if he will be a bother since the class has already ended. The professor asked Minky if he would still be considered a professor outside of school. Minky says of course he is a professor. The professor tells him that it's settled since he's always his professor and professors resolve their students' questions. Minky, with a smile on his face, tells the professor thank you. So we switch over to his lab, and Minky walks past a rock which makes his mystic fist start to react. The professor hands Minky a pair of gloves and then tells him that he has a high rank power. He asked if it's a red sovereign rank power, which Minky says yes, but questions how he knew. He tells him that he has a keen eye and asked how else would he be able to teach at the institute. Minky calls him amazing, and the professor also says that he could tell that Minky has a long way to go before mastering his power. He tells him that when he entered, the surrounding crystals affected his arm. Minky tells him that he hasn't had this power for long and asked if he could get taught by him. The professor then looks at Minky with a questionable face. The professor tells Minky what he told him earlier. His spiritual skills allow him to absorb different substances and burst them out of his mystic fist with the same effect of said substance. When he needs one of those substances, he touches it. He also thought that he had to touch it to cause a reaction, which was proven wrong since he came into the lab and his arm started to react to the surrounding substances. His arm reacts to everything around it. Minky thinks that it's probably because of the higher concentrated medium. He has never noticed these things before. The professor tells him that the more he absorbs a medium, the more pure it becomes and the stronger it gets. Minky then starts to think about it. The professor tells him that he would need to reject medium absorption and focus on spiritual absorption. Minky is shocked but also confused about what the professor said. Then the professor tells Minky to take off his gloves so he could absorb the crystal without touching it. He asked if Minky could do it, which he replied with he could try. So he gives it a try and it starts to work, but he started to absorb everything around him as well. The professor points out that he hasn't mastered his spiritual skills at all. He tells him that his spirit fist is useless and his medium is unstable since he has to touch something to get it activated. The professor gives an example about fire and how if he needed it but it's over 100 meters away and a monster is blocking his path, how would he get it or even use it? Minky agrees with the professor and says that he does have a lot of time where he can't even use a medium. He says that it will be a problem. The professor tells Minky to now touch the crystal with his hand and take a look at the reaction. So he touches the crystal, which covers his arm with it. The professor tells him to stop and then looks at his arm. The professor tells Minky to go with him to the testing grounds to throw a few punches. They enter the testing room and we see debris from other tests according to the professor. He tells Minky to send a punch at the debris and to use his full strength. So Minky throws a punch called the Roaring Ice Fist, which completely destroys the ground and a bit of the surroundings. Minky and the professor looks with shock. The professor thinks Minky's skill is abnormal. Minky tells the professor that this was his first time using such a powerful spirit fist. The professor tells him that it proves that his power is connected to the concentration of the medium. He tells him that the one in the class was a flicker grade crystal and the one he touched just a minute ago was a dazzling grade metamorphic crystal. Minky is excited and praises the crystal. He questions if he is invincible with that medium. The professor laughs at Minky and questions on if he thinks this is Chinese cabbage, which is something that you could just pick up anywhere. Minky asked if there are any crystals that's for sale. The professor tells Minky that the low grade ones would be on sale, but they're still scary. The higher grade ones will most likely not be on sale. Apparently, most owners of the high-grade crystals keep them as treasures. The frost crystal that Minky touched was donated to them by a social organization. Minky questions a method that prepares isomorphic mediums on his body, so while he is in a battle, he could crush them up and absorb them. That means he could steadily burst out spirit fists that is several times stronger. The professor agrees with this idea and tells Ming He that with the external existence, his strength and combat abilities will greatly improve. But there is a single problem. He tells Ming He that it's very expensive to do that idea of his. He questions if Ming He has a lot of money and then tells him that the dazzling grade frost variation is priceless. The flicker grade isomorphs are worth several times more than diamonds. Ming He thinks to himself while crying that he thought he was rich. The professor tells Ming He that he still needs to practice his skills and he could probably prepare 1 or 2 crystals for emergencies. Ming He thinks to himself that poor people have to rely on hard work and only rich people can rely on technology. The professor tells him to start with his medium perception and he says that his ability is excellent. As long as Ming He uses his power properly, everything around him could be used to make him stronger and he could probably create a powerful weapon. Ming He questions what perception is the professor talking about. He tells Ming He to go see, to go listen, to go smell, and to feel everything in the air mixed into his skin. He is still at the level of only seeing with his eyes and what he sees is what is. The limit of seeing with your eyes is there, so it's easy for humans to ignore all the medians and elements that exist. The skin can feel the temperature, his nose could smell all the dust in the wind, his ears could hear the running water, and his hands could feel the wind blowing. The professor tells Ming He that he needs to focus on his 5 senses and practice using them. He should pay more attention to the small but special things and not to let his eyes dictate everything. Ming He asked if he should first practice with his eyes closed. The professor then tells Ming He that he has a few crystals, so he grabs them and hands it over to Ming He. He has a dim grade, a flicker grade, a bright grade, and a dazzling grade crystal. He should first start by trying to identify the grades of each crystal. Ming He says that all the crystals look the same. The professor tells him that he must work on his perception and not just looking with his eyes. He should practice this so in the future it will allow him to be in different environments and be able to tell which mediums are useful to him. Ming He understands and tells the professor that he will make use of everything around him so he could turn them into powerful weapons. The professor tells Ming He that perception is the first thing he should practice and the next will be absorption. When he tells him to absorb something, he doesn't mean to touch it with his hands. Instead, he should use his spirit to absorb it so it could be as far away as several kilometers. Ming He gets shocked and questions on how far away he could absorb things. The professor tells Ming He not to look down on himself and don't take a red sovereign rank power too lightly. One day he could probably absorb lightning that is in the sky and use it as a weapon. It's time for him to start practicing Dachin. Ming He says that he is going to work hard. He can't stand the fact of him feeling small and insignificant. He hates the feeling of being powerless even more. He says that he isn't strong enough yet, but he will definitely grow stronger. We switch to Ming He's dorm room and we see Ming He on the top of the building. He is sitting down with his eyes closed while 4 crystals are in front of him. He says to himself that things still seem the same and he isn't concentrating enough. He starts to focus really hard to perceive them. He finally does it and gets up with excitement. He figured out which grade it is on each crystal. He is now going to start trying to perceive the mediums around him. So he focuses. It isn't that windy, but he thinks if he absorbs it, it will be the equivalent of a dim grade. He isn't letting out that much power, so he is going to try to widen his perception. He feels the wind blowing from a certain direction and it's humid. He then finds a lake and thinks about absorbing it, which would be the equivalent to a bright grade. He comes out of his focus state and says that it is blocked. Ming He then walks over to the edge of the building and he says that it's not bad and it worked. In the future, he won't have to find a medium to absorb. Jiang then sees Ming He and calls for him. He questions why she is there. She tells him that she is there to deliver the stuff he asked for. Ming He then jumps down while his roommates get jealous since pretty girls always come to see him. She tells him that he is in luck since she got him a high quality stardust liquid since the seller really wanted the money. The person didn't even enter an auction to sell it. He priced it at 850,000 and so she got it for him. Minky tells her thank you and she replies with, "That's what she's supposed to do." She didn't expect him to be a student at the Superhuman Institute, so when he gave her the address, she thought she was reading it wrong. He tells her that he doesn't want any of his classmates to know about this and then asked her if she could keep it a secret for him. She says she will, since keeping the customer's privacy is their top priority. She asked him if he would like anything else. Minky gets straight to the point and asked if she could look for crystals that have different elements in them. He's looking for ice, fire, rock, copper, or iron. Also, if she sees any bounties or quests on the board, he would like to know. She says that it isn't a problem and she will take care of it. Minky then thinks of his strength and how it will get upgraded to a corner grade. We switch over to a forest type area and we see Minky sitting down with the liquid stardust. He starts to drink it and we see redness going down his throat. The liquid starts to travel throughout his body and then we see an explosion of energy. He says that it worked and how he is now a corner grade in terms of strength. He then puts on his jacket and then pulls out his phone and he sees Uncle Yuwon calling him. Yuwon asked if Minky is coming to train since it's Wednesday. Minky says that he will since he is in a fighting mood. Hey, let's be honest though, I would be in a fighting mood too after I just got an upgrade. I want to test out my new power, you know? Yuwon tells him that this time he wants him to use his spiritual power. Minky isn't sure since someone might get hurt, but Yuwon says that he will double the price. Minky gets super excited and questions on where they need to meet at. We then switch over to the training field and we see Fang. She says that Minky will lose if they use their spiritual powers. Yuan tells her not to forget since he already beats her twice. She also still owes him for their previous bet, which was to go dance in the middle of the field. Fang says that she had a breakthrough with her skill and Minky might not be able to evade her. She says that Yuan knows just how incomparable her spiritual skills are to most people. Yuan says that they will see, and Minky also just arrived. He thinks Minky is mysterious since he is always wearing a mask. Fang tells Minky she won't show any mercy today. Minky is ready and tells her to come. Thank you all for watching this video and hopefully you guys all enjoyed.